What a treat to be here today with you, Dad.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, Laura, at the University of Minnesota Law School. Congratulations on receiving the Scales of Justice Award.
Thanks, Dad.
Your entire family is very proud of you, not just because of the award, but because of the values and commitments on which it's based. Why don't you talk just a little bit about your commitment to access to justice, and where do you think that value came from?
Dad, you provided such a tremendous role model to my sisters and me for how we should strive for equal justice for all. You and Mom encouraged us and expected us to play a role in our communities. And so, growing up, you were so involved in these values and living these values that being so much in awe of my dad and all that he's done, I wanted to be like my dad. I worked starting out as a lawyer at Morrison & Forster law firm, which is just lives the values of equal justice and access to justice, and they just encouraged and made it so easy and rewarding and inspiring to be involved in those causes and supporting those values.
Laura, for reasons I don't fully recall, we called you Twinkle Toes Frisbee when you were a little kid. Do you recall where that nickname came from?
I think it came from some neighbor kids came when I was really little, and they said that my toes twinkled and I looked like a frisbee, and for whatever reason it stuck. So you would call me either Twinkle Toes Frisbee, sometimes you called me Frisbee, sometimes you called me Twinkle Toes, but it was always in the most loving way.
It's a long nickname. You always had a lot of energy growing up, and that energy was channeled into a lot of positive commitments to various values that make us all very proud.
Yeah, and I love how you and Mom help people who are underserved in terms of partnering with them, getting to know them, mentoring, making a difference in people's lives. So I love the example you and Mom set for us.
Laura, I know another of your very strongly held values is commitment to the rule of law.
Sure, and once again, the role model for me is a giant in the rule of law area who I'm sitting across from, my father. When we talk about equal justice for all, you cannot have equal justice for all if you do not have a legal system, a legal framework that provides the rule of law, because one of the basic tenets of the rule of law is that every person is entitled to equal rights and fairness. And I'm very proud that you are a professor teaching on the rule of law with students from all over the world.
I'm happy with your answer. That's certainly what I believe. The advance in the rule of law is not a straight line. It's sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or maybe sometimes 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. So it's a long-term commitment, but it's essential for justice and equality among people wherever they live. Are there any other areas that your commitment to justice involves that we haven't talked about, Laura?
I think that another critical area for justice is inclusion and diversity. And so I think that you can't have the rule of law unless you have an inclusive society where people have those rights, but they can exercise those rights because it's an inclusive place. So this was an area growing up where my sisters and I were taught by you and Mom that we can do anything and should do anything and consider anything regardless of the fact that we were women.
Well, thank you again, but I certainly believe that anything is possible.
I know I've talked about what a role model you are to me and to my sisters Karen and Linda, and would love to hear a little bit so people can see how you developed these values and your interest in the rule of law.
As dean of the law school and as executive director of the ABA, I have tried to sponsor, encourage programs where people could travel and meet people in other cultures. I think a couple of things are important. Education is very important, and understanding other cultures are critically important to peace in the world.
Yeah.
We have responsibilities as lawyers. There are an enormous number of unmet legal needs in this country. What can lawyers do to fulfill their responsibility as lawyers?
We all have an obligation to create a more free and just society. And so what we can do together is provide pro bono services, fight for equal justice, partner with others to fund or support people doing this work, encouraging the firms that we work with to reflect our values and do more pro bono. I served for many, many years on the ABA Commission on Domestic Violence. I chaired it for several years, and some of my favorite people in the world were people out there fighting every day for equal justice and for stopping violence and for making a difference. And so, again, through the years, I've got to see that when you can be stretched out of your comfort zone, but when you've got a support network, you can do pro bono that makes a difference, even if it's not the area in which you were trained.
Well, it's certainly my experience as well that the more one gives to various programs of this type and identifies with these programs, one's life becomes richer. You reap the rewards of a broader life skill than just your own.
I totally agree, and I think that people are looking for purpose in their lives more than ever before. And by doing justice work, by focusing on what, as a lawyer, you can do to bring about equal justice, it gives purpose to your life. And it brings about kind of the purposeful world that we all want. So in a way, many of us went to law school because we wanted to have that impact.
Laura, with the pandemic having a disproportionate adverse impact on persons of color, what are some of the specific things lawyers can do to provide assistance?
It's tragic, the impact that this pandemic and the ensuing economic recession is having on people who are already underserved. In addition to doing more pro bono, we can support public interest lawyers and others to ensure that there's resources to increase access to justice.
We're in a year right now where I would say a transformative year with regard to issues of equal justice. And do the events of this year give you any encouragement that we may make progress on making equal justice for all a greater reality in the future?
So we still have a long ways to go, but I'm especially encouraged by seeing the next gen of public interest lawyers who are going to live our values and make a more just world. And so I too am inspired whenever I'm around law students. They serve to remind us all why we went to law school, why we want to be lawyers, how we can be the difference we want to see in the world, and how we can work together with others to bring about change.
I know how inspired you are by the Equal Justice Works Fellows. You've gone out of your way to mention them to me through the years of how impressive they are. Why do you think it's important for lawyers and everyone who's able to support the organization and the projects of the organization?
I believe that Equal Justice Works, through our amazing fellows, makes a difference in bringing about equal access to justice. It enables the next generation of lawyers fighting hard for equal rights, fairness, justice, access to justice. And I personally am so inspired every time I talk with a fellow about their incredible projects and the difference they're making. One takeaway I hope that everybody watching this virtual event tonight takes is that it starts with people. It starts with each of us. And if we can just encourage 5 more people, 10 more people to do more justice work, to provide equal justice, to serve the underserved, that's how real change can happen.